Welcome to Momentum Mind, the place where we ignite your inner fire, uncover the purpose behind your actions, and explore stories that teach you how to lead with clarity, courage, and belief. In today's episode, we'll dive into a transformative journey that will show you why starting with why can change everything: your mindset, your work, and your life. So get comfortable, open your mind, and let's discover the spark that drives momentum. Chapter 1: The empty room. The city hummed with its usual rhythm: horns, footsteps, conversations about targets and bonuses. Inside a tall glass building, the kind that glittered even on cloudy days, a man named Daniel Hale sat in a conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and exhaustion. He was the founder of Viratech, a company that had once been alive with energy. People used to come in early, excited to build something meaningful. Now, the mornings were quiet, and laughter had vanished from the halls. The company was still profitable, yes, but something invisible had cracked. Daniel's team entered one by one, clutching their laptops like shields. Marketing wanted new slogans, finance wanted cuts, sales wanted another bonus plan. Everyone spoke, but no one really listened. So Daniel said, his voice steady but flat, "Our numbers are down again. We've tried 3 campaigns in the last 6 months. What are we missing?" A woman named Leah, one of his oldest employees, stared at the whiteboard full of strategies. "We keep changing what we do," she said quietly, "but maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's why we do it." The room went silent. Her words hung there like a whisper that no one knew how to answer. Daniel leaned back, staring at the city through the window. "Why we do it," he repeated under his breath, as if testing the sound of it. It felt strange, almost too simple to matter. But something inside him shifted, a memory he hadn't thought about in years. He remembered the first time he had built something, not for money, not for success, but because he wanted to fix a problem no one else saw. Back then, Viratech had been a tiny workshop, just 3 people and an old computer. They had believed in something bigger than themselves. Now, it felt like they were just selling products. That night, Daniel stayed after everyone left. The office lights turned off one by one until only his desk lamp remained. Papers were scattered everywhere: reports, budgets, failed campaigns. He felt the weight of them, like proof that something essential had been lost. He walked into the empty conference room again. The walls reflected his tired face back at him. "What happened to us?" he whispered. The silence didn't answer, but in that stillness, he noticed something strange: a small, folded piece of paper tucked behind the projector. Curious, he picked it up. It was a note, old and yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was his own. It said, "We exist to make technology human again." The words hit him like a forgotten melody. That was his company's original purpose. That was their why. He had written it on the first day, back when he and his friends had stayed up all night building their prototype. Daniel sank into a chair and stared at the note. The room felt different now, quieter, but alive. It wasn't the silence of defeat anymore. It was the silence of realization. He thought of his employees, each lost in their tasks, chasing metrics they didn't care about. He thought of Leah, who still seemed to remember. He thought of the customers, who used to write thank you messages saying how Viratech made their lives easier, not just faster. When had all that disappeared, the door creaked open, and Leah stepped in again. "You're still here?" she asked, surprised. He showed her the note. "Do you remember this?" Her eyes widened. "Of course. That was the first thing you ever said to us." Daniel nodded slowly. "We forgot it, didn't we?" Leah looked around the room. "Yeah. I think we all did." They stood in silence, staring at the note together. Then Daniel said, "Tomorrow morning, call everyone in. No laptops. No reports. Just people." Leah smiled faintly. "You're planning something." "I don't know what yet," he admitted, "but I know it starts here." He tapped the paper when Leah left. Daniel placed the note in the center of the table, under the soft glow of the lamp. He turned off the lights and walked out, leaving the words waiting in the dark like a secret ready to be rediscovered. Outside, the city was still moving, taxis flashing by, windows glowing with late-night ambition. But Daniel felt something different now, something small and steady, like a spark under ash. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about the next quarter or the next campaign. He was thinking about that question, the one Leah had asked. Why? It felt like standing at the edge of a map, realizing there was an entire world beyond the borders he'd been living inside. He didn't know where it would lead him, or what it would cost. But somewhere deep down, he sensed that everything, his company, his people, even himself, depended on finding that answer. And when he reached the elevator and saw his reflection in the glass doors, he didn't see the tired businessman anymore. he saw the boy who once believed he could change something. The elevator doors closed, and as they did, a thought flickered through his mind, sharp, clear, unstoppable. If we've lost our why, maybe we never really knew it to begin with. And that question, quiet, dangerous, and beautiful, followed him home like a shadow that refused to leave. Chapter 2: The Circle in the Dust. The morning came quietly. The kind of grey, heavy light that makes the city look uncertain about waking up. Daniel arrived at the office before everyone else. He poured himself coffee that tasted like burnt hope and stood in the same empty conference room as the night before. The note still lay on the table. We exist to make technology human again. He ran his fingers across the words, tracing them as if they could speak back to him. For a moment, he wondered if he was chasing a ghost. Companies failed all the time. Maybe this was just another one. But something inside him refused that thought, that small, stubborn spark from the night before. Soon, people began trickling in. Their eyes were sleepy, their expressions guarded. Leah came in last, holding a notebook and a quiet smile. Morning, she said softly. A morning, he replied. When everyone had settled, Daniel stood at the head of the table. I didn't call this meeting for reports or numbers, he began. I called it because we've forgotten who we are. Murmurs rippled through the room. He saw confusion in some faces, impatience in others. We've been so busy chasing what we do and how we do it, he continued, that we've forgotten why we started. Why Viratech even exists. One of the newer employees, a young man named Adam, frowned. With all due respect, Daniel, our job is to sell products. Isn't that why we're here? Daniel smiled faintly. Is it? Is that really why you came to work here? Adam hesitated. Around the table, no one spoke. The air was thick with unspoken doubt. Daniel walked to the whiteboard and drew 3 circles, one inside the other. The marker squeaked softly. This, he said, pointing to the innermost circle, is why. The purpose, the cause, the belief. The reason we exist. He tapped the middle one. This is how. The way we bring that belief to life. Finally, the outermost ring. And this is what. The results, the products, the services, everything people can see. He stepped back and looked at the circles. They weren't perfect. The edges wobbled slightly, like something drawn by hand instead of machine. But that imperfection felt right. We've been living from the outside in, Daniel said quietly. We start with what we make and how we make it, but we never ask why. That's why everything feels empty. Leah leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. So you're saying, we need to start from the inside? Daniel nodded. Exactly. We need to start with why. A silence fell over the room, not the bored kind, but the heavy kind that happens when people start realizing something deep, something that won't let them go. But what is our why? Asked someone near the end of the table. Daniel turned back to the note. We exist to make technology human again, he said. That was our belief from the start. That people shouldn't feel small or lost around the tools they use. That technology should listen, learn, and care. For a moment, everyone seemed to remember something, the spark that had brought them here once upon a time. Leah smiled faintly. It sounds simple. But maybe it's supposed to be. Daniel could see it in their faces now, the faint glow of possibility. Starting with why doesn't change what we do, he said, but it changes how we see it. If we start with this, with purpose, maybe people will feel it again. Maybe our customers will, too. The room buzzed softly with energy, like the sound of an engine warming up after years of being still. When the meeting ended, people didn't rush out. They stayed, talking quietly, sharing memories of when the company had felt alive. It wasn't strategy yet, it was something older and more fragile, belief. Later that day, Daniel stood on the rooftop alone, watching the skyline fade into dusk. The city below glittered with 1,000 ambitions, each window, a story of someone trying to matter. He thought of the circles he had drawn earlier. They were still on the board downstairs. He imagined them now, floating in his mind like orbits around a single, bright idea. But as he stood there, something felt unfinished. If this why was truly so powerful, why did so few people see it? Why did so many leaders lose it? He realized he didn't have an answer. He was still missing something, a piece of the puzzle that connected belief with movement, purpose with action. The sound of the door opening behind him broke his thoughts. Leah stepped out, a jacket draped over her shoulders. You look like a man staring at the end of the world, she said with a smile. Maybe the end of the wrong one, he replied. She came to stand beside him. For a long moment, they just watched the city together. Do you really think we can turn it around? She asked. I think we can remember, he said. And if we remember long enough, maybe the rest will follow. Leah looked at him, thoughtful. Then you should talk to her, she said. There's someone I know. A consultant. Used to work with leaders who were losing their direction. She's different. Doesn't talk in numbers or plans. Talks in stories. In purpose. Daniel turned to face her. What's her name? Evelyn Cross, Leah said. She helped my brother's startup when they were collapsing. She made them remember why they existed, and they changed completely. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And you think she can help us? I think she can help you, Leah said simply. If you're ready to listen. He hesitated, feeling a strange pull in his chest. He didn't know this woman, didn't know what she would say, but the name lingered in his mind like a door he hadn't noticed before. Leah began to walk away, but paused at the door. She doesn't take every client, she said. You'll have to convince her you're serious. Daniel turned back to the skyline. Somewhere out there, among the endless lights, a woman named Evelyn Cross might hold the key to what he'd been missing. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and electricity, the kind that comes just before a storm. He smiled slightly, the first real smile in weeks. Then I guess it's time to find her. As he left the rooftop, the first drops began to fall, tracing slow, silver lines across the glass. And in that rain, somewhere between doubt and determination, a new chapter of Veritech was already beginning to take shape, one that would either save them, or end everything for good. Chapter 3, The Woman Who Spoke in Circles. The rain hadn't stopped all morning. The city seemed wrapped in a grey mist, every streetlight glowing like a distant star. Daniel stood under an old metal awning, the kind that rattled softly whenever a car passed. He checked the paper Leah had given him, a single line, Evelyn Cross, the Atelier, Warehouse District. It wasn't an office address. It sounded more like a studio, or maybe a secret. When he finally reached it, the place didn't look like a consultancy at all. It was an old brick building with tall windows and a weathered sign that read simply, The Atelier. Through the glass, he could see shelves lined with objects, strange ones. Old clocks, torn notebooks, typewriters, bits of metal shaped into spirals. He hesitated before knocking. The door opened before he could. A woman stood there, tall, composed, her silver hair tied in a loose braid. She looked at him with eyes that seemed to see too much. You must be Daniel, she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a quiet power. Leah said you'd come. Daniel blinked. She told you? She told me someone had forgotten their purpose, Evelyn said, stepping aside. Come in. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and ink. There were no desks, no screens. Just open space and circles, drawn on the floor in chalk, carved into the wood, even hanging from the ceiling in metal frames. Interesting decor, Daniel said, half smiling. Evelyn walked toward one of the circles on the floor and stopped inside it. These, she said, are reminders. Every great thing begins with one. Daniel tilted his head. You mean like a golden circle? Her eye sparkled faintly. Ah. You've heard the phrase. I've heard the idea, Daniel replied. Why, how, what, the order that changes everything. But I don't understand how something so simple could change a company. Evelyn gestured for him to step inside the circle with her. Then step in and see. He hesitated, but something about her tone left no room for doubt. He stepped forward. The moment he did, the world felt quieter. The hum of the rain outside softened. Evelyn's voice became almost a whisper. When most people lead, she said, they speak from the outside in. They tell you what they do, the product, the numbers. Some go further and tell you how they do it, their process, their method. But only the rare ones, the ones who inspire, start here. She tapped her chest lightly. They start with why. Daniel nodded. I've heard that before. Then tell me, she said, stepping closer, what's your why? He opened his mouth and froze. He wanted to say something impressive, something that sounded true. But every phrase that formed in his mind felt hollow. He stopped, looking down at the chalk circle beneath his shoes. I don't know anymore. Evelyn didn't look disappointed. Instead, she smiled, a knowing smile, the kind that came from seeing the same moment in others before. Good. That means you're ready to remember. She moved to a table covered with sketches and small models. People think the why is an answer, she said, but it's not. It's a memory. Something that once gave life meaning, before the noise buried it. Daniel's eyes drifted to the sketches, diagrams of circles connected by lines, each one leading to a single point in the center. Your company, Evelyn said, was built on a purpose once, wasn't it? He nodded slowly. To make technology human again. She smiled faintly. Beautiful words. But do you still believe them? Daniel looked away. The silence between them stretched thin. I want to, he admitted. But belief doesn't pay bills. Investors don't care about purpose. Evelyn picked up a small, round mirror from the table and handed it to him. And yet, she said, without purpose, people stop believing in you, in your company, in themselves. And when belief dies, money follows soon after. Daniel looked into the mirror. He saw his reflection, tired and uncertain. So what do I do? Find your why again, she said simply. Not as a slogan. As a truth. As something that breathes. He frowned slightly. And how do I do that? She stepped out of the circle, her footsteps silent on the wood. You begin with a story, she said. Your own. Before the company, before the profits. Who were you when you first wanted to create something? What did you want to change? Daniel tried to remember the late nights with his friends, the excitement, the laughter when their first prototype finally worked. The way they had believed that their creation could make people feel connected again. He swallowed hard. We wanted people to feel in control of their tools, he said. Not trapped by them. Evelyn turned, her eyes bright. That's a why. Not words, feeling. Purpose doesn't start in the head. It starts here. She pressed a hand gently to her heart. That's what people follow. Not your plan. Not your strategy. You. They follow belief. Daniel felt something stir inside him, faint, but real. Like a flicker of warmth in the cold, Evelyn picked up a piece of chalk and drew another circle on the floor, smaller this time. She placed a single candle in its center and lit it. This, she said, is what it feels like when someone truly starts with why. The light grows. It draws others in. Not because it's loud, but because it's alive. The flame flickered, reflecting in her eyes, and when you forget, she continued, the light goes out. The company still exists, but only as shadow. Daniel watched the flame dance. He thought of Viratech, of tired faces and fading laughter. I want that light back, he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. Then you'll have to lead differently. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Show them what you believe, and they'll believe with you. For the first time in months, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years, clarity. He nodded. When can we start? Evelyn looked at the candle. We already have, she said softly. The flame flickered higher, and in its glow, Daniel saw not a consultant or a mentor, but something else, a mirror. Someone who spoke not in plans, but in truths he had been too afraid to say aloud. When he left the atelier, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of metal and possibility. He didn't have a plan yet, no strategy, no roadmap, but for the first time, he had a direction, and somewhere deep inside, a single thought kept echoing, steady and unstoppable. If belief is the light, then maybe it's time to lead like fire. He didn't notice the figure watching him from the alley across the street, a man in a grey coat, holding a folder marked Viratech. His eyes followed Daniel as he disappeared into the mist. The man made a single note in the folder before vanishing into the crowd. Chapter 4, The Man in the Grey Coat. Daniel woke to a pale light filtering through the blinds. The city had a different rhythm now, quieter, almost expectant, as if it sensed change. He poured himself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the memory of Evelyn's atelier and the candlelight still warm in his mind. He wanted to write down everything she had said, every flicker of insight, every word that had made his chest tighten with clarity. But before he could, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. Daniel Hale, a voice asked, smooth and precise. Yes, he replied cautiously. You met someone yesterday, the voice continued. A consultant, Evelyn Cross. Interesting choice. Daniel frowned. Who is this? There was a pause. Then, someone very concerned about the direction Viratech is taking. We can't afford mistakes. Not now. Before he could ask another question, the line went dead. He stared at the phone, a cold knot forming in his stomach. Evelyn had awakened something, but apparently, someone else had noticed it too. Later that day, when he arrived at the office, the tension in the air felt heavier. People glanced at him as he walked past, some with curiosity, others with unease. The note on the conference table seemed fragile now, like it could shatter under the weight of unspoken threats. Leah approached him quietly. Did someone call you this morning? Daniel nodded. Someone warned me, vaguely. She frowned. Did they say anything about why? No, Daniel admitted. Just a sense that not everyone wants us to remember ours. Leah's expression tightened. You're serious then? About starting with why? More than ever, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. But now I know, some people prefer the company stays predictable. Predictable. The word hung like a fog in the room. He realized it wasn't just the market, the employees, or the competition. There were invisible hands shaping everything around him. Invisible, until now the day blurred into meetings and muted discussions. Every time Daniel mentioned purpose, the room's energy wavered, eyes flicking away, fingers drumming, a subtle resistance that wasn't overt, but unmistakable. By evening, he decided to walk the city streets, letting the night air clear his mind. The streets glistened with rain from earlier, reflecting neon signs that seemed louder than they were. The city pulsed like a living organism, alive and uncaring. As he turned a corner near a quiet intersection, he saw a man in a grey coat leaning against a lamppost. The same man from the alley the night before. He seemed expectant. Watching, Daniel froze. The man's gaze locked onto him, unwavering. "Mr. Hale," the man said as Daniel approached cautiously, "I hope your morning was enlightening." "Who are you?" Daniel asked, keeping his tone even. "Someone invested in keeping things on course," the man replied. "Some courses, once changed, can be dangerous. For everyone." Daniel's chest tightened. "What course?" "I'm just trying to remember why my company exists." The man smiled thinly. Purpose is a dangerous thing when it awakens people. People start asking questions, challenging authority, demanding clarity. And not everyone likes that. Daniel's mind raced. "So you're against me?" "Not against you," the man said smoothly. "Against chaos. Against uncertainty. Against risks you can't control." Daniel swallowed. Viratech isn't about control. It's about meaning. Belief. The man in grey tilted his head. Belief is fine until it threatens the bottom line. Daniel felt a surge of anger, but also a strange clarity. This was the obstacle he hadn't fully seen. It wasn't the market or failing campaigns. It was the fear embedded in the people around him, the fear of change, of purpose, of starting with why. "Then you leave me no choice," Daniel said quietly. "If belief is dangerous, I'll make it necessary." The man in grey straightened, his eyes cold and sharp. "Just remember, Mr. Hale, not everyone survives their own awakening." Before Daniel could respond, the man vanished into the night, swallowed by the crowd like smoke. The words lingered, echoing in his mind, "Not everyone survives their own awakening." Daniel walked on, feeling the city differently now. Each light, each reflection, seemed like a mirror of possibility and risk. The world didn't just challenge success. It challenged belief itself. When he returned to his apartment, he opened his laptop and typed a single line in a new document: "Find the why. Protect it. Live it." Then he paused. Outside, the wind whispered against the window, carrying a sense of movement, of unseen eyes tracking him. He realized that rediscovering the why wasn't just a matter of inspiration. It was a battlefield. And the deeper he went into it, the more danger he would face, not just from competitors, but from anyone who didn't want the world to change. Somewhere in the city, the man in grey made another call. "He's aware," the voice said simply. "Make sure he doesn't succeed." "Not yet." Daniel didn't know it, but this was only the beginning. Every step he took toward the why would be watched, tested, and challenged. Every choice would ripple far beyond the walls of Viratech. He closed his laptop, took a deep breath, and looked out at the city skyline. A storm was coming, not of weather, but of ambition, resistance, and belief. And Daniel knew, deep down, that he couldn't turn back, because once you remember your why, the world never lets you forget it. Chapter 5. The first spark. The next morning, the office smelled different, not of coffee or paper, but of possibility. Daniel walked in, his steps quiet but purposeful. The people there noticed. Even in the elevator, he felt their gazes flicker, curiosity, caution, a glimmer of hope. He didn't call a formal meeting. Instead, he went straight to the conference room. The note lay on the table as if it had been waiting for him all night. "We exist to make technology human again." He placed it in the center and gestured for everyone to sit around it. Leah came last, as always, a quiet anchor in the chaos. Daniel began, "I want to try something different today. No slides, no reports, no targets. Just a question: why did you join Viratech?" The room stiffened. A few people looked down at their phones. A few shuffled papers. But slowly, one voice broke the silence. "I wanted to make a difference," said Maria, a senior engineer. Her hand shook slightly as she spoke. "I wanted to create tools that mattered, not just gadgets for profit." Another spoke up, hesitant at first, then with growing warmth. I liked the way we could solve real problems. The kind no one else was even noticing. Daniel smiled. And you still feel that way? Yes, Maria said softly, then paused. But it feels buried. Like we're doing it for everything else now, not that. That's what I want to change, Daniel said. I want us to remember why we started. Not just what we make, not just how we make it, but why. That's the spark that matters. People shifted in their seats. Some skeptical, some hesitant, but a few nodded with recognition, that quiet flicker of something they had almost forgotten. Leah leaned forward. How do we do that? Daniel walked to the whiteboard and drew a circle, simple and imperfect, like Evelyn had shown him. This is our center. This is the why, the belief that drives everything else. We start here. He tapped the center. Everything we do, every product, every decision, every strategy must come from this. Not the other way around. A murmur spread through the room. Some were intrigued, others uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, Daniel could feel something shifting, a subtle current of alignment, the faintest hint of energy returning. Then he paused. He realized this wasn't just about speeches or drawings. It was about action. Let's try a small experiment, he said. Pick one project. One team. And strip away everything that doesn't connect to our why. No metrics, no KPIs, no distractions. Just the work that truly reflects what we believe in. Leah's eyes brightened. I can start with the customer interface team. They've been struggling, but I think there's a way to bring purpose back into what they do. Daniel nodded. Good. And I'll walk through each team myself. We'll find the spark again, and protect it. As the day unfolded, Daniel moved through the office like a quiet current, touching conversations, asking questions, listening. He didn't give orders. He asked, why does this matter? How does this reflect who we are? Something unusual happened. People started to talk differently. Their voices carried a hint of excitement. Small smiles appeared in corners of the office. The energy felt alive again, fragile but unmistakable. By late afternoon, Maria approached him, holding a prototype she'd been hiding under her desk. I worked on this last night, she said. I wanted it to feel right. Not just functional. I think it's closer to what we should be doing. Daniel took it in his hands. It was rough, imperfect, but alive. This is exactly what I mean, he said. Purpose over perfection. Belief over polish. Leah came by, looking thoughtful. It's like a spark, she said. Tiny, but enough to light a fire if we protect it. Daniel smiled. For the first time in months, the office felt alive, not because of numbers, or strategy, or deadlines, but because people remembered why they started. But as the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the glass walls, a sense of unease returned. The man in the grey coat hadn't disappeared. He was always there, unseen but watching. Daniel didn't know it yet, but the spark they had ignited today was dangerous. Not for the company, but for the people who had grown comfortable controlling it. The higher the light climbed, the more attention it would draw. As he left the building, the streets glimmered wet under the fading light. A shadow detached itself from a corner, following his every step. The man in the grey coat was patient. He didn't need to rush. Sparks could ignite fires, and fires could consume everything. Daniel felt the night wind on his face and smiled faintly, unaware of the threat trailing him. He had found the spark, but the city, and the shadows within it, were ready to test whether it could survive. Chapter 6. The fire spreads. The next morning, the office felt different. The elevators no longer carried only the weight of routine, they carried whispers of curiosity, quiet smiles, and the faint hum of possibility. Daniel noticed it the moment he stepped through the doors. People weren't just moving, they were moving with purpose. He walked past teams huddled around sketches and prototypes. Maria's prototype from yesterday was on display, and a small crowd had gathered, quietly testing, discussing, laughing. The spark was alive. Leah met him in the corridor, holding her notebook. It's spreading faster than I expected, she said. Her eyes shone. People are actually thinking about why, not just what. Daniel nodded. Good. That's exactly what I wanted. But this is only the beginning. He held a short meeting with the leadership team. No slides, no metrics, just stories. He asked them each to share why they had joined the company, what they had believed in at the start. Some stumbled. Some laughed nervously. Some spoke with honesty that surprised even them. By the end, the room vibrated with an energy that felt almost alive, fragile, yes, but undeniable. Later, Daniel walked through the building, stopping to talk with employees at random. He didn't give directives. He asked questions. Why does this matter to you? How does this reflect our belief? It was subtle. It was small. But it spread like fire in dry grass. Teams began sharing ideas, working together in ways they hadn't in months. They began to notice each other again, to believe in the work and in themselves. But fire always attracts attention, and not all attention is welcome. By mid-afternoon, Daniel noticed the first signs. A few emails that were unusually sharp, almost confrontational. Questions about budgets, timelines, and productivity that carried an edge of warning. Then came the whispered conversations in corners, employees glancing toward him with uncertainty, as if afraid that the excitement might collapse any moment. He didn't yet know it, but the man in the grey coat was in the building. Watching. Waiting. Patient. Calculating. That evening, Daniel met with Evelyn again, at the atelier. The rain had returned, gentle and persistent. Evelyn didn't greet him with smiles or questions. She simply drew another circle on the floor, smaller, tighter, more focused than before. This is your next step, she said. The spark is alive, yes. But now comes the test. Belief spreads. Inspiration attracts. And every movement threatens those who benefit from the status quo. Daniel frowned. So the man in the grey coat, he's just the beginning. She shook her head. He's a symptom. Resistance grows whenever light spreads in places that have been dark for too long. You'll face doubts, fear, people who want comfort over clarity. That's why you must protect the why, not as a slogan, but as a living thing. Daniel looked down at the circle. The candle in its center flickered. And if it goes out? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She simply lit another candle, placing it beside the first. Then you light another. And another. Until it can't be ignored. The next day, Daniel returned to Veritech with a new plan. Not a plan for growth, for revenue, or for campaigns, a plan for belief. He held a workshop for the entire company, inviting teams to speak, to share stories, to identify the moments when their work truly mattered. People spoke of late nights solving problems, of customers whose lives were changed by small features, of colleagues who had inspired them. By the end of the day, the office felt alive in a way Daniel hadn't felt in years. People were smiling, leaning in, collaborating spontaneously. Energy radiated from cubicles, from huddled corners, from the glass walls that reflected not just their faces but their renewed purpose. But the grey coat had not been idle. By the time Daniel left the building that evening, he noticed a figure standing across the street, just at the edge of a shadow. Watching. Waiting. Daniel's phone buzzed. A message: be careful. Not everyone wants the fire to spread. He looked up at the city skyline. The light seemed brighter now, more insistent. The office, the city, even the people themselves, all of it seemed charged, alive. And yet the shadows lingered. He understood, suddenly, that starting with why was not just about inspiration. It was about courage. About resistance. About knowing that every spark, no matter how small, would be challenged. And Daniel felt the thrill of it, the electricity of possibility, and the dread of the unseen battle that was just beginning. That night, in the quiet of his apartment, he drew another circle on a piece of paper, larger this time, connecting the why to the how and the what. He lit a candle beside it, watching the flame dance outside. The man in the grey coat slipped into the alley, disappearing like smoke. But he left something behind. A single note slipped under the door of Veritech. Not everyone survives their own awakening. Daniel stared at it, his pulse quickening. The fire had begun, the spark was alive, and already, someone wanted to see it snuffed out. Chapter 7. The first confrontation. The office had never felt so alive, or so fragile. Daniel walked through the halls, watching people speak with energy he hadn't seen in months. Laughter bubbled from small corners, collaboration hummed through open spaces. The spark he had nurtured was spreading, but he could feel the undercurrent of fear hiding beneath the excitement. He didn't have to wait long to see it manifest. During a leadership meeting, one of his senior managers, Robert, leaned forward, his voice sharp. Daniel, I've been thinking, he said, tapping his pen aggressively on the table. This why idea, it's inspiring, sure. But we're losing focus. Deadlines are slipping, clients are noticing, and the board will not tolerate this much longer. Daniel met his gaze evenly. And if we focus only on deadlines and numbers, we lose what makes our company valuable. We lose belief. We lose people. You think the board will care about numbers if everyone here stops believing in what we do? Robert's jaw tightened. They will if the company fails. Inspiration won't pay the bills, Daniel. We need stability. Predictability. Control. Daniel leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. Control is what got us here. Predictability is what's suffocating us. I didn't rebuild Viratech to maintain comfort, I rebuilt it to remind us why we started. The room fell silent. Some leaders looked down, unwilling to challenge him, others glared with restrained anger. Robert's hand twitched toward the stack of reports in front of him, as if the numbers themselves could enforce his argument. Daniel straightened. I know this is risky. I know it's uncomfortable. But risk without belief is chaos. Risk with belief, that's growth. And that's what we need right now. The tension in the room was almost physical. Finally, Robert slammed his pen down. I hope you know what you're doing, Daniel. Because if this goes wrong, you won't be the only one paying the price. Daniel said nothing. He knew he hadn't won everyone over yet. Some people would need to see, feel, and experience before they could understand. And others, perhaps never would. Later that evening, as the office emptied, Daniel lingered at his desk, reviewing the day. His mind wandered to Evelyn's words, every movement threatens those who benefit from the status quo. He realized Robert wasn't just resisting the why, he was the first of many obstacles, a symbol of the inertia he would face. Then his phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number, we've been watching your progress. Do not mistake inspiration for control. You're being tested. A chill ran down his spine. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He thought about the spark in the office, the energy he'd seen earlier, the prototype Maria had shown. And he thought about the man in the grey coat, patient, calculating, invisible but present, waiting for him to make a mistake. The next morning, a meeting invitation appeared on his calendar. No sender, no explanation. Only the words, let's talk. 6 p.m. Rooftop, Building C. Daniel knew immediately who it was. The man in grey. He spent the day walking the office slowly, checking in on teams, speaking softly about the why, reinforcing belief. He watched the spark flicker in small victories, a designer who solved a problem in a way that reflected purpose, a marketing team brainstorming campaigns that felt authentic rather than forced. The flame was alive, but vulnerable. Evening came, and Daniel ascended to Building C's rooftop. The city sprawled below, lights flickering like a constellation brought down to earth. The wind whipped around him, carrying the faint scent of rain and smoke. The man in grey waited, hands in his pockets, coat collar raised. Daniel Hale, he said, voice calm but edged with danger. I admire your conviction. I really do. But do you understand what you've started? I understand exactly what I've started, Daniel replied, keeping his tone steady. A company that remembers why it exists. A team that believes in what it does. And yes, a challenge to those who prefer the world stays the same. The man smirked. Belief is fragile. People are fragile. Your spark may inspire some, but it will terrify others. And those afraid, they'll fight back. Daniel took a deep breath. Then I guess we'll see who is stronger, fear or belief. The man in grey tilted his head, studying him. Clever. Bold. Naive. We'll test that theory soon enough. Remember this, not everyone survives their own awakening. Without another word, he stepped back, disappeared into the shadows of the rooftop, leaving Daniel alone with the wind and the city. Daniel exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what was coming. The spark was no longer just a flame inside Viratech, it was a beacon. And with every beacon comes a shadow, a force determined to snuff it out. He looked down at the glowing lights of the city and whispered to himself, almost like a promise, then I'll protect it. No matter what it takes. The rooftop felt emptier now, but Daniel sensed the movement of forces around him, unseen eyes, quiet whispers, the subtle resistance of a world uncomfortable with change. And in that quiet, dangerous moment, he realized, starting with why was not just about leadership or inspiration. It was about survival, because when belief lights a fire, there will always be those who try to drown it, and the fire had only just begun. Chapter 8, Allies and Doubts. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of Viratech, reflecting off sleek monitors and polished desks. The office buzzed with cautious optimism. Daniel moved through the space, sensing the subtle shift in energy. The spark he had ignited was still alive, but it needed fuel, not just belief, but allies willing to protect it. Leah met him near the elevator. We've got momentum, she said, voice soft but determined. People are starting to ask questions, share ideas, even challenge old habits. But she hesitated, biting her lip. There's resistance too. Robert isn't the only one. I've noticed whispers in other teams. Doubt. Fear. Daniel nodded. I know. Sparks attract attention. Not all of it welcome. He glanced down at the floor, tracing the faint outline of a circle he had drawn in chalk during yesterday's workshop. We need people who understand why. People who will protect it, nurture it, and spread it without losing focus. Leah's brow furrowed. Do you have anyone in mind? Daniel thought of Maria, the engineer who had shared her prototype with purpose rather than perfection. He thought of a few quiet voices in marketing, designers who had shown glimpses of inspiration. People who still remembered, or had never forgotten, what they were truly working for. By mid-morning, he gathered them in a small meeting room. The space was tight, intimate, a circle without walls. Daniel began quietly, I want to start something different. A group dedicated to one goal, protecting and spreading our why. Not to replace leadership, not to control the company, but to ensure belief survives. He paused, scanning the room. If you feel the spark, if you believe in the purpose we've rediscovered, I need you with me. Not everyone will join, and that's okay. But those who do, we must trust them completely. Maria raised her hand. I'm in, she said simply. Others followed, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. By the end, Daniel had a small but resolute group, allies bound by belief rather than obligation. For a while, the day felt lighter. Teams collaborated more openly. Projects moved forward with creativity rather than compliance. People smiled in corners of the office, sparks in their eyes that mirrored the candlelight from Evelyn's atelier. But doubt never sleeps. During lunch, Daniel noticed a small cluster in the corner of the cafeteria, familiar faces, leaders who had resisted his why initiative. Their conversation was quiet, but the tension radiated. He caught fragments, too risky, distraction, leadership undermined. He felt a sting, not of fear, but of clarity. Resistance was natural. Sparks always cast shadows. And shadows could grow if ignored. That evening, Daniel returned to the atelier. Evelyn was there, as always, surrounded by circles of chalk and metal spirals. She didn't ask what he had done that day, she simply gestured to a circle on the floor. Every spark, she said softly, needs protection. And every protector faces doubt, from outside, and often from within. People forget their why. People fear the change it brings. That is the test. Daniel sank into the circle, the candlelight flickering around him. I found allies, he said. People who remember, or who want to remember. But some are afraid. They might try to stop us. Evelyn nodded. Then the question is not whether they will stop you. The question is whether you are prepared to lead in spite of them. Daniel thought of the man in the grey coat. His presence was subtle, but the message was clear. Opposition was patient, strategic, and invisible. Every small victory could be tested. Every spark could be challenged. Back at Viratech, the first signs of pressure began. Anonymous emails criticizing projects. Urgent calls questioning resource allocation. A subtle, insistent tension in every conversation. Yet, amidst the resistance, the small circle of allies grew stronger. They met quietly, shared ideas, and reinforced the belief that had been nearly lost. They reminded each other daily, the why was not just a statement, it was the fire that gave life to their work. One evening, Leah approached Daniel. We've been too focused on the inside, she said. People are feeling inspired, yes. But the board and the larger market are noticing changes too. They're watching closely. Daniel looked out at the city skyline through the window. Lights flickered across the streets below, a mirror of the activity inside the office, alive, restless, unpredictable. Then we need to be ready. Not just to inspire, but to defend. Sparks can grow, yes, but they can also be extinguished. He turned back to the team huddled around him. We'll move forward. Slowly. Carefully. But always guided by the why. If we do that, nothing, not resistance, not fear, not shadows, can truly stop us. Outside, the wind picked up, swirling through the streets and alleys. The man in the grey coat observed from a distance, noting the movement of allies, the rekindled fire. His lips curved into a thin, controlled smile. The war of belief had begun. The fire was spreading. But for every spark, there would be shadows waiting to test it, and Daniel knew, deep down, that not all of his allies would survive the coming storm. The circle was forming, the team was gathering, and the city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether the spark would ignite into a blaze, or be smothered before it could grow. Chapter 9. The first test. The morning light fell hard across the office, casting long shadows between desks. Daniel felt it the moment he arrived, a subtle shift in the air, a tension that wasn't curiosity or excitement, but something heavier. He walked past teams, noticing hesitations where there had once been sparks. Eyes flicked to him and away, whispers hovered just out of hearing. The resistance he had sensed was no longer hidden, it was moving, spreading quietly, like ink in water. His phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen: check the client reports. Urgent. Daniel frowned. He hadn't requested anything. When he opened the file, his stomach tightened. The data was troubling. Projects that had been on track were behind schedule. Key clients had lodged complaints. Metrics had slipped, seemingly overnight. The board had noticed. Minutes later, a sharp knock sounded at the conference room door. Robert entered first, followed by two others from the leadership team. Their faces were set, their expressions controlled, but Daniel could feel the underlying accusation, the weight of doubt pressing down. Daniel, Robert began, voice tight, we need to discuss the current state of the company. Client satisfaction is down, deadlines are slipping, and frankly, the board is concerned. Daniel exhaled slowly, keeping his tone calm. I know. And I also know why. These numbers don't tell the full story. People are starting to remember the why, and that change is uncomfortable. Unspoken tension hung between them. Robert leaned forward, hand clenched. Uncomfortable isn't an excuse. If this continues, we're risking everything. Maybe this why experiment was a mistake. Daniel stood, feeling the fire inside him rise. A mistake? No. People are remembering purpose. They're thinking, creating, believing. That's what we lost, and what we're reclaiming. Numbers fluctuate. Belief lasts. Robert's eyes narrowed. You're putting ideals above results. That's dangerous. Before Daniel could reply, a soft buzz came from his phone again. A new email, no sender, no signature, just one line. Sometimes the why costs more than you can pay. Daniel's hand lingered over the phone. He could feel the warning behind it. The spark he had ignited was under attack, from inside the company and from forces beyond his sight. He took a deep breath. Then we'll do this carefully. We'll honor the why without ignoring accountability. But we will not abandon what makes us alive. Robert shook his head. You're being reckless. Daniel met his gaze steadily. No. I'm being visionary. And this is the first real test. Either we survive it, together, or we don't. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Silence stretched as each leader weighed the words. Then, quietly, Maria spoke. I believe in this. I've seen what happens when we forget why. This feels right. We need to see it through. Others nodded slowly. A few hesitated, but the shift was subtle and clear. Some would follow the spark, and some would resist. That night, Daniel returned to his apartment, exhausted but alert. He looked at the city from his window, lights twinkling like countless sparks, some steady, some flickering. Somewhere out there, the man in the grey coat watched too, calculating, waiting for the first real failure. Daniel opened his laptop and wrote a single line in a new document: we protect the spark. We honor the why. No compromise outside. The wind swirled through the streets. Shadows moved along walls, unnoticed, patient. The first test had arrived, a mixture of internal doubt, external pressure, and silent threats, and Daniel knew that surviving it would mean more than just defending a belief. It would require courage, strategy, and the ability to ignite others even in the face of fear. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The fire was alive, yes, but already under siege. And he understood, deeply, that this was only the beginning of the true battle, one that would determine whether Viratech would remember its why, or become just another company consumed by shadows. The first test had begun. Chapter 10. Rising flames. The city woke under a crisp, pale light, the kind that makes every street corner seem like a stage. Daniel moved through Viratech with a sense of purpose sharper than ever. The first test had rattled some, but it had also strengthened others. The spark had survived, and now it was growing. Teams that had hesitated before were beginning to act boldly. Maria presented a new prototype to a small group of loyal colleagues. The design wasn't perfect, but it carried intention, purpose, belief, the kind of work that made people remember why they started. Daniel watched quietly, feeling a swell of pride. This was more than a product. It was a signal, a flame, a tangible echo of the why he had been fighting to protect. Leah came by, notebook in hand, a small smile on her face. The spark is catching, she said. Some of the outer teams are starting to notice. They're asking questions, even suggesting ideas aligned with our purpose. Daniel nodded. Momentum is growing. But so is the resistance. The higher the light climbs, the more shadows gather to challenge it. And he was right. By midday, the first signs of external attention became visible. A key client, one that had been quietly influential, requested a sudden meeting. The message was polite, but insistent: we need to understand your current strategy. The recent changes are surprising. Daniel knew what this meant. The spark was no longer hidden. It was visible, inspiring some, alarming others. He entered the meeting with his closest allies, Maria and Leah, flanking him. The client's representatives were sharp, demanding, and subtly skeptical. They asked about deadlines, profitability, deliverables, questions that could have undermined his approach if answered only with belief. Instead, Daniel spoke differently. He shared the story of Viratech's purpose, the why behind every project, the vision that had guided the company from the beginning. He spoke not in numbers but in belief, in impact, in meaning. By the end, the clients leaned forward, curiosity softening skepticism. They asked more questions about how the products reflected the why, and less about rigid schedules. For the first time, Daniel realized the spark could influence the world beyond his office. It could inspire, attract, and align even those who had been cautious. Back at the office, the mood was electric. Teams discussed ideas with renewed energy. Designers sketched bold concepts. Engineers experimented fearlessly. The fire was rising, and everyone could feel its warmth, but resistance never sleeps. That afternoon, a subtle campaign of doubt appeared. Anonymous notes left in mail trays, emails questioning the feasibility of projects, whispers in hallways. The man in the grey coat was still there, watching, calculating. His methods had changed, patience replaced by subtle provocation. He didn't need confrontation, he needed hesitation, doubt, and fear to creep in unnoticed. Daniel noticed it immediately. Even small tremors of doubt could extinguish a spark if ignored. He called his allies into a small meeting room. Rising flames attract attention, he said calmly. Not all attention is welcome. Resistance will test us at every step. Some of it is subtle, some of it will be direct. We must act, not with fear, but with clarity and alignment. Leah nodded. Then we double down. Reinforce the why, support teams, and address doubts before they spread. Maria added quietly, and remind everyone why we do this. Not just what we do, but why it matters. Daniel smiled faintly. Exactly. Belief is contagious if nurtured, but fragile if ignored. Every spark must be protected and fanned. That's our mission. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the office floor, Daniel walked to the rooftop. The city stretched endlessly, lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere in those streets, the man in the grey coat watched, unseen, noting every movement, every ripple, every spark. Daniel lit a candle he kept there, a silent ritual, a reminder of the fire he was protecting. The flame flickered, small but stubborn, reflecting in his eyes outside. The wind picked up, rustling through the alleys, carrying whispers of challenge. The spark was alive, yes, but the battle for its survival had just intensified. The fire was rising. And soon, the shadows would strike. Chapter 11. The shadows strike. The morning light barely penetrated the fog that hung over the city. Inside Viratech, the office felt tense. The spark was alive, but it was uneven, flickering in some corners, bright in others. Daniel walked the halls, noting the subtle shift. Faces were strained. Conversations had hesitations embedded in them. The resistance he had sensed for weeks had grown bolder. It began quietly. A missed deadline here, an unexplained error there. Small things, but enough to rattle confidence. Then came the first serious confrontation. Robert entered Daniel's office, his expression rigid. "Daniel, we need to talk," he said. His tone carried the weight of authority and threat. "Client X is unhappy. Productivity metrics are down across the board. The board wants answers, now. This why initiative, it's causing chaos." Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes steady. Chaos? Or awakening? People are remembering purpose. They're creating, collaborating, believing. That's the foundation of long-term success, Robert, not just numbers on a page. Robert slammed a report onto the desk. "This isn't enough. The board doesn't care about belief. They care about performance, deadlines, and control. If you don't deliver, the spark you're chasing will burn us all." Daniel felt the fire inside him flare. Then we'll meet the challenge without abandoning the why. But we will not surrender it for comfort or fear. If belief dies here, everything else dies too. The tension was palpable. Robert's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth to argue again but paused, aware that Daniel wasn't backing down that afternoon. The man in the grey coat made his presence unmistakable. Daniel was walking back from a meeting when he noticed him across the street, coat collar raised, eyes cold and calculating. He didn't move, didn't speak, yet Daniel felt the silent pressure, the invisible hand pressing against the spark. Inside the office, subtle attacks began multiplying. Anonymous emails questioning team decisions. Rumors seeded in hallways. Confusion around responsibilities. People began to second-guess themselves, their ideas, their contributions. Daniel called an emergency meeting with his allies. Maria, Leah, and a handful of the dedicated team gathered in a quiet corner of the office. "They're testing us," Daniel said softly, voice low but firm. "They are not just resisting change, they are trying to extinguish belief. If doubt spreads too far, the spark dies." Leah's eyes were wide but determined. "Then we reinforce. Support teams, remind everyone why we do this, and don't let the noise distract us." Maria added, "And lead by example. If they see us falter, the spark will dim. But if we hold, it grows." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Every hesitation is an opportunity for the opposition. Every fear is a chance to reinforce purpose. We protect the flame by being the fire." As the day ended, he walked alone to the rooftop. The city sprawled below, a labyrinth of lights and shadows. The candle he lit flickered violently in the wind. Just as his thoughts flickered between hope and worry, the man in the grey coat appeared at the edge of the rooftop, this time stepping closer than before. "You can't protect everything," he said, voice calm but edged with menace. "Every spark draws attention. And attention has consequences." Daniel stared, unwavering. "Then we face the consequences. But we will not extinguish the why. People need it. Teams need it. The world needs it. And I will protect it." The man in grey smiled thinly. "Brave. Foolish. We'll see how long it lasts." He vanished before Daniel could respond. The wind picked up, carrying the sense of impending confrontation. Inside Viratech, small fires of doubt had been lit by shadows, but the spark persisted, nurtured by belief, courage, and allies who refused to surrender. Daniel knew the coming days would test everything: the loyalty of his teams, the resolve of the board, and the strength of his own conviction. The first real strike had landed, and the battle for the why was only beginning. Chapter 12. The flame unbroken. The city was alive with motion, yet a quiet tension hovered over Viratech. The week had been grueling. Small doubts, subtle resistance, and the invisible pressure of the grey-coated observer had tested every nerve, every decision, every conversation. But Daniel felt something stronger now. The spark was no longer fragile. It had grown into a steady flame, visible in the eyes of the teams he had nurtured. He walked through the office early that morning. Maria was reviewing designs with a clarity and confidence that seemed almost electric. Leah was guiding a team discussion with quiet authority. Even those who had once whispered doubts were beginning to engage, leaning forward in curiosity rather than fear. Daniel paused in the main hall, letting the energy wash over him. The fire had spread, small, flickering at first, but now warm, persistent, alive. The board meeting was scheduled for late morning. Daniel had prepared, not with slides or numbers, but with the story of Viratech as why. He knew the board would challenge him, question him, demand results. He also knew that belief, when aligned with action, was a force that could not be ignored. As he entered the boardroom, the air was thick with expectation. Some faces were skeptical, some impatient, but Daniel met them evenly, exuding a calm conviction that made the room pause. "Viratech is more than metrics and deadlines," he began, voice steady, carrying across the polished table. "It is belief. Purpose. Inspiration. Our teams are remembering why they do what they do, and that's already transforming the way we create, collaborate, and innovate." Questions came fast. What about deadlines? What about clients? What about profit margins? Daniel answered each one, not with excuses, but with evidence of the spark's impact. He told stories of engineers inspired to solve impossible problems, of designers who had created solutions rooted in purpose, of clients whose experiences had deepened because belief guided the work. By the end, even the most skeptical board members leaned back, hesitant to dismiss what was no longer abstract but tangible. When the meeting ended, Daniel returned to the office. Teams were waiting, quietly watching, their expressions a mix of hope and anticipation. Maria approached him first. You did it, she said softly. They saw it. Daniel shook his head. We did it. Together. The day passed in a blur of activity. People worked with a new energy, solving problems with intention, collaborating without fear, creating without compromise. The spark had become a flame, and its warmth was palpable, but Daniel knew the man in the grey coat had not vanished. Shadows remained, subtle but present, watching, calculating. Daniel had learned to accept it. Opposition was the measure of the fire's value. That evening, he climbed to the rooftop once more. The city stretched endlessly, a constellation of lights, each one reflecting the life and possibility below. He lit a candle and placed it beside the ones already there. Watching the flames dance, the man in grey appeared again, stepping from the shadows. His eyes were cold, calculating, but there was a grudging respect in his stance. You've survived, he said quietly. Your spark, it's stronger than I anticipated. Daniel met him steadily. It's not mine. It belongs to everyone who believes. You can't extinguish it, not with fear, not with doubt, not with shadows. The man in grey studied him a long moment, then stepped back. Then perhaps some sparks are meant to become flames. And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving only silence and the wind. Daniel knelt beside the candles, watching their steady glow. He felt the truth of Evelyn's words in every flicker of light. Once you find your why, the world can never take it from you. Behind him, the city hummed with life. Inside Veritech, teams worked late, inspired and unafraid. The spark had survived its first strikes. The flame was unbroken. Daniel smiled, a deep, quiet smile. The battle had been real. The opposition had been fierce. But purpose, the why, was a force that no fear could fully contain, and somewhere, in the flickering lights of the city, he knew that every person who had remembered their why would carry that flame forward, lighting others, igniting change, and proving that belief, when protected and nurtured, was unstoppable. The rooftop wind whispered against the glass, the candlelight danced, and Daniel stood tall, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The fire was alive. The flame unbroken, and the world was watching. Thanks for listening to this episode on Momentum Mind. If this story inspired you, imagine what we can explore together next. Which audiobook should we break down and bring to life in our next journey? Comment below with your favorite pick. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Momentum Mind so you never miss a spark of insight that can transform your life. See you in the next episode.